probably
For
wouldn't
those,
say, okay, you guys, if you're listening, add comments. Other than that, it's just us having a conversation.
it
So
is. We're just recording so others can listen in and
yeah,
go,
exactly.
oh yeah, I get
Well,
that.
they can be flies on the wall in our lives.
So the topic today being taking the good with the bad. Thank you for coming up with the succinction of that, because I was like, well, I know what the idea was, but I didn't have a topic name. So thanks for bringing that to the table.
I just Googled a bunch of good and bad quotes and tried to find something that sounded good. But I don't even know what this is. I do not know.
Oh, well, let me share. So a few weeks back, so one of the reasons that we haven't been able to do a Facebook Live for a few weeks is because, for one, I went on a cruise, which was fabulous fun. And the first cruise I've been on since before COVID. So that was exciting to experience. We were keen to see what the differences would be compared to the last time. Quite honestly, there was no difference. There was no social distancing. There was no, COVID? Really? And there was COVID on the ship, but no one seemed to care.
Wow.
The only thing that was very noticeable was the staff were all wearing masks.
Okay.
But there was no other requirement.
That would definitely be noticeable on a cruise.
Unless they were presenting the trivia or the crosswords or the Sudoku challenges which of course I attended all of them, then they didn't wear their masks. So I was on a cruise and it was fabulous. We had a lovely balcony room. We did all the bells and whistles because we could, and it was fun, and it was there for a week. On the last day of cruising, however, I fell, I'm going to call tripped, fell, just went head over heels over a stair and fell to the floor. And I managed to break one of my toes, not my big toe. So it's not as dramatic as a big toe, because a big toe can be nightmarish, but I broke one of my other toes, and it immediately put us in a position where we had to be extra careful. And so that was my first example of, great, this is great. We're on a cruise, we're having a fabulous time, and now this bad thing happens, right? And there's this emotional roller coaster that happens. And I did notice that, and I did experience it while we were on the cruise. But it was sort of one of those examples of there's the good and the bad at the same time. Now that was fine. We dealt with that. We got home. My foot up was pretty much what the rest of the week entailed, because the swelling had to go down and all of that. And then that's fine. That's one story. That's fine. And it wasn't a big deal necessarily until I got this second example of taking the good with the bad. And I was literally on the phone to my mother-in-law, and I have briefly shared this before, but my father-in-law is not well, and he last week had to go to hospital. He's now back home, so that's okay. He has an illness that will basically is killing him slowly, which is very sad. I was on the phone to my mother-in-law, and she was telling me about how he needed to go to hospital. And I had her on speaker, so I was looking at my phone while I'm talking to her, and she's telling me all the things that have happened, and now that he's got to get to hospital, and now what they've got to do, and there was an operation on the Tuesday and another one on the Thursday, and it was like there was this long, all these things that had occurred. And at exactly the same time that I'm talking to her, my daughter sends through her final results for her university. And that meant that she passed and that she could graduate. And it really spotlighted for me, there can be something really bad going on, and yet at the same time, this phenomenal confirmation of something really good.
Mhm.
And it was so spotlighted because it happened at exactly the same time. And I was like, wow, what do I even do with that? Here I am. I was kind of put into this neutral space where I was being empathetic to my mother-in-law and wanted to cheer and celebrate my daughter at the same time. And how do you reconcile that? Like, what do you do with that? So that was, I just put the congratulations to the side in that moment and just kept the conversation going, and then
finish the bad conversation first.
finished that conversation. But you know what I actually then did is at the very end of that conversation, I then shared that amazing news with my mother-in-law. And it actually helped her because it gave her something else to focus on. And it didn't take away the bad from her or perceived bad, but it gave her something extra.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, once we finished that part, I then hung up from her and I rang my daughter straight away, and we did all of the, yay, isn't that exciting? Now you get to graduate. Yeehaw. And I could completely be in the moment with her. And then, of course, at the end of that, yay, we're congratulating you. Oh, by the way, the update on your father-in-law, on your grandfather is blah, blah, blah. Okay. So we could combine the good and the bad, and it didn't seem to take away from either.
Mm.
And I noticed that the role I played in that was pretty neutral. And I got me thinking about, we can have these bad things happen and we forget that there's always something good happening at the same time.
I'm curious about this because as you're speaking, it kind of reminds me of watching the news. So where it's where the focus of the energy of the whatever, like the director or the head of the station or whatever, it's the attention grabbing news, which tends to be negative news.
Yes.
Right? So their focus is there because they want to have eyeballs and they want to make sure that it's sensational, and they pump out all of that stuff, and it tends to be more on the negative side, but it's because of where they align their focus. But there is the amount of negative news in the spectrum of what's going on in the world and how much amazing things are happening is probably pretty minuscule. But where
it
we
is,
put
it's
our
just
attention,
that it gets highlighted, doesn't it?
it gets focused. We put our attention there for whatever reason, and then that becomes, oh, look at all this bad news. Oh. So I try not to look at any one thing as negative or positive. It's just, where am I focusing right now? And am I focusing so precisely on one thing, or can I see the bigger picture as to what am I learning from this? What's the value in this for me? How can I see this from another light, as opposed to that black and white, good or bad, or even neutral?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's such a spectrum of things that go on constantly. But yes, when we get caught up in either the amazing celebration or the very sad thing or the hard thing or the whatever, we forget that there's this range in between both of those extremes, and it's okay to experience all of it. And it's being highlighted for my mother-in-law. You know, she is finding day-to-day really tough and wanting to get to the end of this, but also not wanting to get to the end of this, and wants a completely different reality, but also knows that there is not a different reality. And like being accepting of all of her expression of that. And it, mind you, she can go from one extreme to the other of, I'm really struggling to, I just want to be to the end of this, but I just want him back to what he was, all within a 1 minute window. Like we go through these spectrums can go through them really fast. And I think it's important to realize that we do them and we don't just, something's not just good or just bad. So yesterday with my daughter graduating, which I'm super proud of, it is huge
I
in
saw the
my
pictures.
life.
I saw the pictures. I saw the kisses.
Pretty proud. For those who don't know, my daughter has just graduated as a vet, so she is officially a doctor and will be heading out into the real world now for more real world education because she has finished her formal education. So we now have a doctor in the family, and as exciting and celebratory that all was yesterday, there's also this, it wasn't sadness, but it was like a recognition that she now leaves her childhood and her, you know, because even though she's 23, still going at uni, there's still some teenage behavior that goes on. She completely leaves that now and steps into adulthood.
So is that her? Is she sad that she's leaving it behind, or are you sad that?
Oh, there was a bit of both, probably for different reasons. So for us, for me and my husband, it's more because she now creates her life outside of us, where we've helped create the life up until this point. For her, it's she doesn't have that buffer of university and all that brings.
Mm-hmm.
And she has to stand out on her own. And we were joking. It got highlighted in the conversation around, oh, you're going to walk in as the new vet when you go to your new place of work. You'll really notice it when you get the first student that comes along for their, placement, and then you won't be the student anymore. And she was like, oh yeah, I won't be the student anymore. And this was sort of her playing catch up. She'd already graduated. She knows she's not a student anymore, but the perception of that and what that would, where she's stepping into. And I think there's just this spectrum of goodness in feeling all of it, rather than just going, yes, we're proud, and yes, that's the celebration. Because then on the way home, I was having another conversation with my mother-in-law, because that's daily now. And it's like, we're now juggling those two things in the same moment. And because I'm connected to both of those situations, but I'm slightly removed, I feel it's quite easy to handle both of those. I think when we have it personally and it's something good and something bad is directly happening to us, it can be difficult to find that space to observe it.
It's interesting, because what I was thinking was, I believe that we're never given more than we can handle. Right.
Agree.
So if you've got a little bit of what you consider to be the bad and a little bit of what you consider to be the good, it kind of gives you the chance to be able to balance it off and not have your energy go too far one way or too far the other. Instead of, my boyfriend left me, I lost my job, like all the big things happening at once. And sometimes when you're in that situation, you might not be able to see any of the value, the good, the learning, the growth, all of that stuff that is really there for you if you choose to look at it. But if you're not, and you have these other things, it gives you a chance to play with the teeter-totter, have the pendulum kind of swing a little bit each way without it being too far off the rails.
Yeah, and allowing yourself to see it, and allowing the I guess it's a self-balancing process, isn't it? Where you just can find a piece of both and find a way to feel okay in all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, for whatever reason, right now in my world, the good and the bad at exactly the same moment are being really highlighted. And I figured that, you know, Christmas coming up, that kind of thing, we can often have these same circumstances occur.
Like
We can be
looking forward
really,
to Christmas and the kids, but also having family coming to visit. I'm not, if mom's watching this has nothing to do with you, but I know other people, I know how this works. So there could be, right, that clash.
that conflict of, I'm feeling really excited about this, but I'm also dreading it. Yes, it's this conflict that we feel, and then we can let one or the other overpower instead of actually allowing them to mix and making it just part of the experience. And so I thought it was relevant. It's obviously relevant for me in my world right now. I mean, my daughter's moved out. She's moving on from us. I mean, this week has been kind of fun because she's wanted my validation on a whole bunch of things like hair and makeup and what about these photos? And like there's been a lot of that, which I've just indulged in. But you know, that day is over. The week of indulging is done, and it's now time for her to just do her. And so even in indulging in that goodness, it also brings with it there's going to be a change in that.
Mm-hmm.
And she's going to move away slightly. Now, it might happen instantaneously, but there's going to be a pull away. And, you know, it brings both.
For whatever reason, I'm kind of called to say, like, your relationship and your interactions with her may be changing, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad change.
Correct. And we can get caught up on the fact that because it's different, it's wrong or it's bad or it's negative. And
because you become attached to that version of momming and dogging or whatever. But now you both have the opportunity to evolve that relationship in a different way, where you're able to grow as, I don't know if you want to say more as friends or whatever it develops into.
Totally. And there was a moment yesterday when we first saw her, because as we were approaching the ceremony, it was an hour and a half before the ceremony, but there was a lot of, I'm going to call them adults, young adults, and a lot of black capes and black hats. And my husband jokingly went, "Oh, I can see her now. She's in the black cap. She's the one in the black cap." I'm like, they're all in black caps. So when she emerged out of the crowd of black caps, I saw this adult. She'd sort of arrived. And it was a really cool image to go, now we begin. And yeah, so now I will hold on to that as a turning point. Now she begins as an adult. And yes, the relationship with her and I get to start, not necessarily fresh, but just allow it to move into where it needs to go. And then in 5 years' time, that'll probably change again. And just being okay with that. It just seems so relevant for every day. I mean, yes, I'm talking about big events in life, and they're sort of significant big events, but we actually have these happen on a smaller basis every day. I mean, if I look at it with clients, for example, in my business, I can have a client not show up, for example, and that can feel really sucky, quite frankly. And then another client, you know, rings me out of the blue and hasn't for 6 months, and that can make me feel really good, and that can happen pretty much at the same time. And it's about finding how those two actually flow together, and they don't have to be isolated experiences.
What do you mean they don't have to be isolated?
Well, we don't have to isolate, oh, well, it was a bad day because I had a client no-show.
Oh, so the labeling of, you don't have to label it as being a good or bad thing. It's just it is or was.
Yeah.
Our brains are messed up.
Oh, yes, mine is very messed up.
Preach to the choir. But what I mean by that is like we often label all of these things that happen as a certain good or bad or disrespectful or whatever. Like I could have done the same thing with a client a few months ago where she missed 2 calls in like a couple of months, which was really, really weird. She paid me for both, which was amazing. But when you hear the stories afterwards about why they missed, you then have a level of like understanding or sympathy or empathy or whatever is happening for them in that moment that you didn't have because you let your mind run off with it as being, like I
Oh,
said,
they never got back to me. They
disrespectful.
didn't show me the respect. Yeah.
Whatever, right? Like it's just a bunch of malarkey that we've got going on in our head, and we give it a name, we give it a voice, and then we run with it. And then maybe that affects the way that we conduct ourselves throughout the day or with the people in our lives. But if we can be a little more understanding and neutral and just not label it, just, oh, that's the fact. Okay, great. So I'll follow up with her tomorrow and find out what happened or whatever the case may be. Like it doesn't have to be a big thing.
Yeah. And we do make things bigger. And I wonder, go back to your point about the way that media tends to sensationalize the negative to get us to pay attention because that particular thing needs some attention. We kind of get a little bit programmed to pay attention to the negative, which I think contributes to our messy heads.
And like to that point, like I watch less and less TV. However, I have like my iPad on with YouTube on a lot of the time. So I see the patterns of what I am focusing on based on what's through my feed. Because if I press more things on spirituality and feeling good and meditation and what, like I'll see more of that stuff or art or something. But
algorithms.
If I've gone on a cycle of watching some US politics because it's just kind of like a I don't know, like a
comedy show,
like a Jersey Shore kind of thing where you just get sucked into these stupid reality shows that aren't real, but whatever. It's kind of like that. It's like the shit that happens there is weird and it's hard not to watch. So I'll see based on my tendency.
Choice of focus.
Yeah, what is showing, what is more in my feed. So, but I will get to a point where I will see stuff and I'll be about to push it. And I'm like, that's not a good thing. I don't actually want to know what's on the other side of that thing. And I'll let it go.
Yes, I must admit, I have that behavior with reels. I'm like, seriously, no, swipe up, no, oh yeah, that's funny.
I will do that with Facebook. It'll like I don't click on UFC stuff like the fighting. Like I don't enjoy that stuff. It actually makes me feel kind of uncomfortable to watch somebody get beat up.
Yeah, so, I'm not so with that.
I actually click on it and say remove. And then it asks you why. I'm like, because I'm not interested or whatever the case may be, because I don't want to see that stuff.
Yeah.
And totally. Then it disappears for a while and then it resurfaces. I'm like, nope, I still don't want it.
just in case you were
in case somebody else
changed your mind.
7 million views, it must be good.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? We get caught up in what everyone else reacts to and responds to, which then goes, oh, there you go. That's how we need to respond to that. But we could just come back to what it is, the way that we want to respond to it.
Interesting. So this makes me think about, okay, so you're in a pretty decent headspace when it comes to receiving these bits of information from about the
circumstances,
the ailing father-in-law. Oh, and look, my daughter's graduating, she's amazing, blah blah. what do you think about the person who is constantly sharing the bad news with you? Like where
Ah,
their focus is coming from.
yeah. So when somebody's sort of sitting in the drama and just keeps doing that, yeah. So, good question. I've had that recently, actually. I did have that this week. A new client on board who's now sitting in a bit of drama. And for them, I actually, so from where I sit when I talk to them, I have to actively lower my expectations and allow the little seeds of different perspectives to land. So if, as a viewer of them, as an observer of them, if I can see that there's just a moment of clarity, that there's just a moment of a slightly different perspective, and then they go back into the drama. It'll be easier next time when they need to grasp a different perspective because they've had a practice of it. So and this is the way that I've moved myself out of drama. It didn't happen overnight, but it has happened. Reminds me of an old shampoo ad over here in Australia. Anyway,
that jingle that you would like to sing? Is there something? Okay, no, okay.
No, it won't happen overnight, but it will happen. And it was a Kiwi accent. So it's, anyway, I think it was a hair product. I'm sure it was shampoo back in the 80s. So it didn't happen for me overnight, but if I just borrowed other people's perspective on what they saw going on in me. I mightn't have believed them yet, but I just borrowed it for a little while. And that helped to create a little bit of a space that the way that I would see drama wasn't always the whole truth. And I think that was the key for me to learn that there was more than just drama. So that's what I've done over the years to move myself away from getting caught in that spiral.
Because it's easy to get caught up in somebody's story and go down into that spiral with them if you're not careful. But what you've done is basically throw out some other options for them that they can choose from that maybe feel a little bit better for them, that isn't completely out of the drama, but it's like, I never thought about it that way. Okay, maybe I can see your point, right? And then they dip back into their other thing and they keep going.
Yep, and you go, good. I'm glad you could see my point for a second. Woohoo!
Opportunities. You kind of got to meet people where they are, but you can't just jump in with them. Otherwise, you'll drown with them.
Yeah, totally. And so that's, and I know that when you work with people, you do something very, very similar where you're just expanding where they currently are. And
I call it not getting wet. So if the way that I've described my work in the past is, as a coach, you're better off on the riverbank while the person that you're coaching is floundering and flopping around in the water, drowning in their story. If I go in the water, I'm no longer of service to them. But if I stay on high ground and I can say, hey, what's around you? Who could you contact? Who could you look to? What's that around the corner? What do you see? Here's my perspective. What does that do to help you, I don't know, see your situation differently? If I jump in, I get wet. So when I'm talking with other clients, and sometimes when I'm talking to them about them not getting involved in other people's stuff, I'm like, you just got wet. And just the humor and the noticing that when they get involved in someone else's problem or story too much, they become not of service in their life either. So I've had clients talk to me afterwards and say, yeah, I just got wet. Or I totally jumped in the river with them, or whatever. I totally drowned. but you can't change what you can't see. So once you have the realization that you do have a tendency to dive in with them,
dive in and be wet with them. Yep.
and then you can start making a shift for yourself as to how you approach situations,
Yes.
good or bad.
And I think at the end of the day, that's what I've been able to do. And I thank you for sharing that analogy, because that one's going to keep me on top of this as the next few weeks progress, because it's going to be easy to fall into other people's rivers.
The other piece with that, though, just for context, everybody's on their own journey in life, right? Some people need to have that drowning experience for them to wake up in their life to do the thing that they need to do or have the experience they need to have.
Oh, the drowning's not the problem. No, it's the getting sucked into the drowning when it's not your
right. But that what I'm getting
lesson.
at is we're all on our own path to do whatever, and it's not ours to fix or to solve or to whatever. If they come to us because they want our services, want our support, that's different, but they have their own life to live. And if you own their problem by diving in to try to save them, you are not serving them.
And I think it's also on that point of we're all on our own journey, I might see someone else and they might look like they're drowning in a river, and yet someone else will be able to see me and say, and what river are you swimming in, Chris? And that helps me keep in perspective as well, right? And to go, well, sure, I may not be drowning in that river over there, but what do I need to pay attention to?
Yeah. I know we're a couple minutes over here, but like if I go back to in my relationships in the past, people have made a lot of judgments about me and the decisions that I have made. And a lot of people could have seen those to have been wrong choices, wrong decisions, bad choices, bad decisions. But if I did not go through those experiences, I would not have learned the lessons I needed to learn in order to live the life I am now living. So to judge what other people are doing as a good or bad is irrelevant, because it's their journey, their thing, their reason for being here. It has nothing to do with you. So if you can stay out of those things, stay on the sidelines, not get wet, not necessarily even judge them as good or bad.
Not even judge that drama is bad, because drama isn't always bad. Drama has to exist for our emotional being to process.
So drama's not bad.
Like all things, good in moderation.
Good in moderation. Only on YouTube for 10-minute clips. Got it. Okay. Not the full episode. Gotcha.
Correct. Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you for giving me the window to be able to share a bit about some of the good and bad that, technically speaking, is happening in my world, and yet we are still all standing up straight and walking quite well through it all. And I think it's just good to remember that there is always good if you're feeling a little bit bogged down in the bad.
Yeah, there's always another way to look at things that can feel better if you take the time to do it or look at it or ask somebody else to help you see that.
See what that is. Yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
I actually got a reminder yesterday or today saying this is our last call of the year, and I'm like, what?
Oh no,
you sent that?
No.
And then it was like, it was 2021 post. I'm like, oh, it was like the reminder, like a memory from Facebook. So I think this will actually be our last one this year as well. I have family coming. I think probably the night that we would be speaking. So we will see each other in a month, provided that that works for you.
Next year.
Next year.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Awesome. We will see everyone then.
Awesome. Take care, everybody. I'll see you then.
Bye.
Bye.